In this update, we've got daily storm chances for severe weather that'll bring some large hail and severe wind gusts, and the intense heat really starts to build. But we do have a summertime cold front on the way that'll offer some relief, plus an update on the tropics. Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder on Weather here with your Thursday morning update. How's it going? Hope everyone is having a fabulous week out there. So let's delve into the details this morning and the overall setup, because we do have yet another day of slight risk storms. They're going to be breaking out in Montana again. Portions of Billings all the way spread it into, this will fishtail down east southeast along that ridge. Just on the north side of that ridge, that's where we've been seeing the storm activity. That's where we're going to be seeing it today. And we do have an increased instability once they get into Kansas City, back into St. Louis, into Springfield. That'll be traversing down along that boundary into places like Bowling Green, into Nashville, heading all the way into Knoxville, back into Charlotte. That'll creep into all the way into Charleston, all the way into the coastline, into Myrtle Beach, into Wilmington, and back into Virginia Beach. Those are the areas that are going to be on highest alert for those stronger thunderstorms later on this afternoon into the evening time frame. Here's the setup this morning. It's right along this boundary. Been seeing this day after day. So if you see this, these are cold fronts, right? So it's all blue. That's indicative it's still pushing further south. Once these kind of transfer to these, red and blue, that's kind of an indication of where it's more or less stationary. And right here, that's where it's been stationary. And we've been picking up some heavier rains into portions of Missouri this morning, and actually will continue into the afternoon hour. And that's where this boundary is. This is where the setup of the focal point of all the showers and thunderstorms this afternoon. And further south, you're under that ridge and that dominating high pressure where we've got all the excessive heat warnings and watches and then the heat advisories. But along this boundary, we're going to be dealing with some pretty excessive rain. So flash flooding is a concern in these areas into portions of Montana, back in the Dakotas here. There's also some increased instability into northern Missouri, southern portions of Iowa here. That'll fishtail down into central and southern Illinois, as well as Indiana, all the way into Kentucky here. This whole swath with this yellow, we're talking about 2 to 4 inches of rain, and some isolated spots, not out of the question, can actually pick up some 6-inch rain amounts, especially I think about northern Missouri here. But that'll have the instability and then increased rainfall and intense rainfall, especially along the coast, where we do have a potential low pressure system. But I think we'll eventually try to get its act together, or at least try off the southeast coast as we get deeper into the week. But yeah, here's the setup further south. I mean, it's all about the intense heat. All the areas in orange here, that is your heat advisory. That's typically issued when the heat advisory the excessive heat index increases to 105 at least plus. Whenever you see these purple shaded areas, that's where you see those excessive heat warnings, and that's where you can see a heat index of 110 degrees or greater. That's some intense stuff, guys. I mean, it's dangerous out there to work outside, so you definitely have to stay weather aware and just limit yourself outdoors and stay hydrated, because this heat is definitely nothing to play with. And this is a huge swath of the deep south all the way into the southeast. But going into tomorrow, as we head into your Friday, we do have yet another round of increased instability in a lot of the same areas we've been seeing. So more storms are going to be blowing up into Montana again. They're not going to be nearly as intense as they traverse across this boundary, just kind of a marginal risk, at least at the moment. But as the high pressure system will slowly shift and actually shift over portions of Oklahoma and Texas, that'll slowly shift the storm threat just a tad bit further south. So now you're talking about places into Atlanta, back into Macon, all the way into Montgomery, but could see in those stronger storms as we head into Friday. But there's the heavier rains set up further to the north, still along that boundary. So Kentucky gets hit twice in a row, 2 days in a row. So you're talking, yeah, you're going to be adding to these totals 2 to 4 inches, another 2 to 4 inches. So over the next 2 days, we could be looking at some isolated spots, 4 to 6 inches in some of these areas across the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley, back into Kentucky, into West Virginia. So overall, here's the overall 2 day setup. underneath all these whites area, that's where the high pressure is. That's where the sinking air is. It's almost next to impossible to rain in those areas. It's all going to be just to the north of that ridge. And that's where we can be seeing all that convergence taking place and all the lift in the upper levels of the atmosphere. That's going to bring some heavier totals right there in northwestern and northern parts of Missouri, upwards to possibly 6 inches of rainfall, and that'll fishtail into portions of Illinois, Indiana, and especially as you head into Kentucky with some higher rain amounts. So this whole swath is under the gun to seeing some of those flash floodings, and some of these areas could pick up 1 to 2 inch rain amounts at times, as the atmosphere will really kind of squeeze out the rainfall in those areas. And as we get to the coast, we've got some warmer coastline temperatures, and that's kind of more or less slows down along the coast, and it's going to be taking advantage of some of the Atlantic moisture. We could be looking at increased activity, or at least elevated rains, pushing upwards to over 4 inches, especially along the coastal areas. But it doesn't stop there, because we still have a storm threat headed into Saturday. And again, a known spot for all the severe weather, again, breaking out into Montana again as we go into Saturday. That'll go into portions of North Dakota again, into Bismarck, into Grand Forks, and into Fargo. And again, as the high pressure system will slowly drift back, back further west, setting up shop over Oklahoma and a good chunk of Texas by then. You got all the dominating sinking air, but that pushes the storm threat just a little bit further west. So now we're talking places into Arkansas, into Mississippi, going into Alabama. That'll eventually head into the Florida Panhandle as we get into your Saturday time frame. There's the overall rain amounts, and the most significant rain amounts as we head into your Saturday. Lighter amounts closer to the high pressure. Further away to the high pressure, you have increased rain amounts and all more convergence. So yes, along the coast, even on compounding what I showed you, those rain amounts today and tomorrow, we have additional rain amounts, especially along the coast in South Carolina and North Carolina. So if you live out there, expect a wet time frame over the next 3 days for sure. But yeah, there's the ridge of high pressure as we go into Sunday. There's some subtle hints it's going to be shifting a tad bit further off into the west. You might sneak in a weak cool front. It's just very weak, a weak cold front. There's again, another deepening upper level trough that's going to be getting its act together way up in Canada. That will slowly migrate over time and fishtail just a tad bit further south as we go through next week. But man, it's all about the heat as we go into Monday. So that slowly shift, it only going to act maybe just in the afternoon time frame. The high comes back and really intensifies. You're probably going to be seeing your hottest temperatures of the year and around portions of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. 107 degrees, well into the hundreds, as you're going to be maxing out well into the Oklahoma area, as well as into Kansas City. The ridge of high pressure, you can see these 90s trying to pop up along the coast here. So this ridge, as it slowly shifts further west, that's going to be increasing the temperatures as we slowly get into through the weekend, and especially as we head into Monday. We're talking widespread 90s up here into the portions of the Pacific Northwest, getting into Idaho here, as the heat will start to creep in your area and start to intensify. But again, I told you about a cold front, right? It slowly shifts in the upper pattern, because there's going to be that upper level trough that's going to be digging in from the northeast, bringing a little bit cooler conditions that will slowly start to ooze down. So as we go into Monday, kind of especially into Tuesday, we have this little boundary here that's going to be setting up shop in the further south around New Orleans, around the Florida Panhandle, with where along that convergent zone, that's where you're going to be having the showers and thunderstorms. But as we go into Wednesday, there's that cold front. You can kind of really see we're not talking 100-degree heat anymore. I mean, we're the excessive heat warnings, the watches will be displaced by this little cooler boundary. It's subtle. It's very small. I mean, it's some relief. We're in the middle of summer, guys. So yeah, but there is a cool front that's going to be shifting further south. So by Wednesday, a lot of these areas that'll be seeing the intense heat, especially over Texas, will see a brief, very brief somewhat cooler conditions. It won't be the 107s, but all the ridge of high pressure will be sinking a little bit further west to allow that cool front to sneak in, and you might be at close or maybe slightly below 100-degree heat in a good chunk of Oklahoma and Texas by then, with that little cool boundary that's going to be taking place. So hey, it's brief, but it is a summertime cold front that will be on the way by the time we get into middle of the next week, and in fact most of, if not a good chunk of, the portions of the Ohio Valley, and eventually start creeping into the southeast, and then it'll offer a very brief break to the intense, very intense heat that's going to be on the table for Texas over the next couple of days. And there's that little cool front, the upper level trough that's going to be digging in. So we look at the higher upper level atmosphere, there is that weak instability. So you could have 2 days there, Wednesday or Thursday, to offer a little bit of brief into the intense type heat, as this upper level trough will really start to dig in. But what's going to happen is, as this heat will really start to intensify out west, it'll actually lift a little bit further north now. So now we're talking places as we creep into the late next week. Now the really intense heat will start building and pushing further and further north, and really kind of almost get into Canada by then. Look at the temperature anomalies as we go into next Friday. So this is next Friday. So this is after the brief little cool down. The ridge of high pressure does come back in the midsection of the country, and it really starts to intensify again in the middle of the country. Now we're talking areas further north, and all the severe threat areas in Montana and the Dakotas. That's going to be replaced with well above average temperatures, as the ridge and more sinking air will start to take shape. So that's a subtle pattern shift that's going to unfold after you're going to be dealing with the daily rounds of severe weather over the next couple of days. But man, check out the temperatures by the time we get into next weekend. The ridge of high pressure comes back with a vengeance over Texas, over Oklahoma again, back into the 105 range. Now even Denver, 103. So that's going to be some intense stuff that's really going to be building in the midsection of the country and the plains, and that'll creep all the way up in the Dakotas again. 107 degrees now, all the way up in almost Canada, 103 in Montana. So we're going to be having some intense heat as after that little cool front that will come through, and the ridge will come back and really start to build. So now let's head to the tropics. There's not much going on, guys. We're pretty much in a suppressed phase of the Mann-Julia oscillation. So here's where we live with all the red. That's all the sinking air, right? That's just all the sinking air. It's almost next to impossible to get any upward rising motion thunderstorms out there in the open waters there. So it's pretty calm out there into the Atlantic this week. And really into the next week, there's a lot of sinking air that's going to be dominating from the 15th through the 21st. So I'm not seeing much of anything. And there's a lot of shear to contend with as well. So here's the shear map as we go into next week. All the deep reds, that's a ton of shear. A good chunk of the Caribbean, a good chunk, even the Gulf of Mexico, and even along the coast here. So that's got, suppressed air and then a lot of shear. So it's going to be very, very difficult. And that's why the ensemble members guidance, the latest European guidance, EPS guidance, just even over the next 15 days, basically has next to nothing, with all that sinking air to contend with, all that wind shear to contend with. The frontal, the outlook on the tropics looks pretty quiet, really, for the foreseeable future. We could have that cold front. There's a little cold front, again, that low pressure system after 3 or 4 days of rain right off the coast. There's going to be a low pressure system that could try. There's subtle hints of trying to form something tropical out here. If it does, it'll be brief, and it would actually shift off and well out to sea. So if it does anything that comes out of this, kind of like Colin did, will actually be short-lived and then well out to sea. But right now, I'm not really expecting anything to form on the tropical front, just a low pressure system off the coast of the southeast as we get deeper into the week. But here's the overall GFS guidance. Kind of implies the same thing, has that front over portions, with the low potential of something trying to form Yeah, it's got another fantasy storm trying to hit Texas again. It's only done this about 20 or 30 times, so obviously none of that's actually even come close to fruition. So, but overall, the tropics is eerily quiet at the moment, but I do expect things to ramp up again as we get into August, for sure. So, hey, I appreciate you guys watching. Huge shout out to all my channel members out there. Greatly appreciate the support on the channel. If you do want to become a member, all you got to do is click the join button and the subscription below and the headlines below, and then catch the next update where I protect you before and after the storm.